What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we got a good one for you guys. We are going over one breakout at each position. That's right, one quarterback, one tight end, one running back, and wide receiver. Each player on this list we feel has a strong case to take a major step forward for the 2021 season. Obviously, each and every year, there are many players that do break out, so of course this list is not all inclusive, but we do believe each player that is listed in today's video has a strong case for improvement for 2021. Before we do get into the video though, just a quick shout out, all draft packages on our website are currently 15% off. This is a limited time offer that is available now through the end of April, so be sure to take advantage of it while you can. And with that, let's hop over to the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day, just one non-first round wide receiver has ever had more than 1,000 receiving yards before their age 22 season. Which wide receiver was that? And the correct answer was actually Keenan Allen. Congratulations to Doug Evans DM, who got this answer correct in the YouTube comments first, and over on Twitter, which you guys can go and answer today's stat of the day question on for a chance to win your shout out. That winner was at WycoSports_S. So congratulations to both of you. As for today's stat of the day, which wide receiver with at least 100 targets averaged the most separation? Once again, that's which wide receiver in 2020 with at least 100 targets averaged the most separation. Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. With all of that out of the way, we're going to hop right into our first player, and we're going to begin with arguably the most important position in all of fantasy. That's right, the running back position. In today's breakout player we have is DeAndre Swift of the Detroit Lions. Now keep in mind, looking back at DeAndre Swift's end of season stats, a case could be made for him to have already broken out in his rookie season, which was 2020. But for anybody that really owned him knows that it did take a large portion of the season for him to even get starter level snaps. Then as soon as he was starting to receive that starter level workload, he unfortunately did suffer a leg injury that did hold him out for 3 games, leading into the tail end of the season where he finally was able to put together some consistent production. His involvement in usage, what we saw from him through the first 9 games, he was used in more of a change of pace type of role for this offense that can easily be seen by playing on 46% or fewer snaps in 7 of his first 9 contests. Now, since returning from his injury, the final 4 games of the season, averaging a 60% snap share through that span. It should come as no surprise that his highest production totals came in games where he was most involved in the offense, and the further that we did get into the season, the usage and involvement for DeAndre Swift was increasing. One thing I also want you to keep in mind is that if DeAndre Swift, and my expectations for him were that he was going to match what he was doing towards the tail end of last season, where his production was at its highest for that year, then no, I would not include him on this breakout list, because I believe that heading into 2021, even when we're comparing his top level of production in 2020, I think for this upcoming year, the 2021 season, DeAndre Swift can even take a major step forward and produce even higher than what he was doing at his best in 2020. I do not want to take anything away from what he was able to do in his rookie season, averaging 14.4 PPR points in fantasy football. While that is not a small accomplishment by any means, it is, however, only going to be good enough for a mid to back end RB2 at best. And my expectations for DeAndre Swift this season is more in line with a player that's a back end RB1, but also one that comes with the upside to push for mid-grade RB1 numbers with a ceiling for a top 5 finish at the position. The formula for DeAndre Swift to post RB1 numbers for 2021, it's pretty simple. It all stems down to his involvement in the receiving game, an aspect of his game that we could see on full display even in the contests in which he played on a small snap share. While there were only 4 contests in 2020 in which he played on 60+% of snaps, he still managed to receive 4 or more targets in all games but 2, an area where he ultimately finished 13th at the position, which really makes you wonder exactly how high his receiving ceiling can go in 2021, especially if he's a player that never leaves the field. Assistant head coach and running backs coach Deuce Staley, he's already came out and said that he envisions DeAndre Swift as a workhorse running back. That expectation falls right in line with offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn, who expects a similar role for him in 2021 as well. As we know, running backs with heavy involvement in the receiving game, they have an extremely high floor week over week, giving you the added benefit for anyone that owns him of not having to worry about those games where their running back doesn't score a touchdown because the lack of production in that one area can be negated by a 4-reception game for 40 yards, immediately giving your running back a floor of around 8 fantasy points. If you're confident that your running back can finish a game with a modest stat total of 4 for 40 in the receiving game, then the amount of rushing production you're going to need to at least get your running back to produce double-digit fantasy points, it's not going to be all that high. In this example, a mere 20 yards. But for running backs that get virtually no involvement in the receiving game, finishing a game with a mere 20 rushing yards and no touchdown, that's only going to net you just 2 fantasy points. Those are the types of weeks that can completely destroy you in fantasy, and the type of weeks I don't think we'll see from DeAndre Swift whatsoever, which is a factor that I think will consistently have him ranking near the top 12 running backs in nearly every contest this upcoming season. So I believe we can all safely be in an agreement that DeAndre Swift should be one of the higher floor running backs being drafted in his range. But I did mention earlier that I think he does have potentially a ceiling of being a top 5 running back. Reaching his ceiling though should be a bit more difficult than meets the eye because, as we know, Matthew Stafford is no longer a Lion. Detroit is going to be heading into the 2021 season with a brand new quarterback, Jared Goff. While there have been many moments throughout Jared Goff's career in which he has performed as a top 10 passer in the league, for the most part, his quarterback play can be summarized as inconsistent at best. Comparing Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford over the past few seasons from a statistical standpoint, you may not notice a massive gap there, but considering Jared Goff had been playing under Sean McVay, one of the greatest offensive minds we have in the NFL, it really makes you wonder exactly what we could expect in a less than ideal situation moving from LA over to Detroit. Last season, the Detroit defense allowed the most yards in the entire league. If that's a stat that we do see hold true once again for the 2021 season, it is going to put Jared Goff in a position where he's going to have to do more. And historically, in those types of games where we're forcing Jared Goff to do more than he should, those are the types of performances we've seen Jared Goff perform his worst. On the flip side, a defense that's allowing the opposing offense to put up a lot of yards, that does typically lead to production in the receiving game being heavy for receiving running backs in the 3rd and 4th quarter, once again thus boosting the floor of a player like DeAndre Swift, a factor adding to why I believe he's going to be one of the higher floor running backs being drafted in that range. But of course, if Jared Goff does come out in 2021 and surprises us firing on all cylinders, DeAndre Swift should easily be able to outproduce where he's being drafted. And while that is less likely, of course, with Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones exiting to free agency, 2 of Detroit's top receivers over the last several years, yes, missing those 2 very talented receivers is going to overall hamper this offense, but regardless, it's still a factor likely leading to more involvement for DeAndre Swift for the 2021 season. Alright guys, we're moving over to the next player on our breakout list. We're moving over to the tight end position, and we have Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears. If you're looking for a player that's going to be on this list that you could possibly nab in your 2021 drafts, then Cole Kmet could definitely be your guy. Right now, he currently has an ADP of around the tight end 22. Unlike a player like DeAndre Swift, who's likely going to be drafted within the top 18 at the running back position, having a tight end coming off the board as the 22nd at their position, that means this player is borderline going undrafted. So if you're a person that's heading into the draft with an eye for Cole Kmet, and you know he's coming off the board as the 22nd at his position, then so long as you do reach for him a round or 2 higher than he's projected to go, the likeliness of you leaving the draft with him on your roster is very, very high. Our strategy when drafting in the later rounds is always to find players that could finish top at their position. We're of course not trying to draft the tight end 22 with an expectation and a hope that he finishes as the TE19. No, we want a player that could finish as a top 8 tight end in that example. So Cole Kmet not only makes a late round breakout target for us, but he also falls right in line with our late round drafting strategy. Looking at Cole Kmet's end of season production and his statistics he compiled over the season, they're not going to jump off the board at you. He finished 2020 with 44 targets, 28 receptions for 243 receiving yards to go along with 2 receiving touchdowns. Now 28 receptions and 243 receiving yards is nothing to get excited over, but one thing you have to keep in mind is that Cole Kmet is a prime example of a player having a tale of 2 seasons. Only 8 of Cole Kmet's 44 targets in 2020 came over the first 8 games. All 7 of Cole Kmet's top targeted games came through his final final 8 contests, including 4 of his final 5 games resulting in 6 or more targets. 2 of those games he had 7 targets, one of those contests he even received 8, and as we know, finding a tight end in the league who's receiving a target market share around 6 to 8 targets per game, those types of players just don't grow on trees. In fact, in 2020, only 5 tight ends in the entire league were able to average 6 targets per game throughout the entire season. That does mean that if Kmet was able to average the same target market share he was receiving over the final 6 games, then we possibly could have a tight end on our hands with a top 10 workload. And as we know, opportunity is one of the biggest leaders to fantasy points. As for Kmet as an individual contributor and an athlete, he's well above average, 6'4", 262 pounds. He runs a 4.7 40, which was in the 73rd percentile, 83rd percentile speed score, 88th percentile burst score, and even a 66th percentile catch radius. Having Jimmy Graham playing snaps over him in the early part of his rookie season should come as no surprise. The tight end position, even more than most others in the NFL, is one of the harder positions for rookies to learn. Typically, we don't see rookies in that position posting starter level production, but that was something Kmet towards the tail end of the season actually was. Now, the biggest hurdle and obstacle in the way of Kmet posting top 12 production, that's going to come down to the quarterback play. And currently, the Chicago Bears are heading into the season with Nick Foles, but will have an opportunity to grab a quarterback in the upcoming NFL draft. The Chicago Bears have already used the franchise tag to bring back Allen Robinson, a player that's definitely going to help this offense get in more scoring opportunities. So for those of you being concerned about Allen Robinson soaking up too much targets, there should be plenty of targets to go around. So I believe the re-signing of Allen Robinson is actually a boost to Kmet, and with him currently being drafted as the 22nd overall tight end off the board, there is plenty of value to extract from him on draft day. Alright guys, we're moving over to the wide receiver breakout candidate we have for you today, and that player is none other than Michael Pittman of the Indianapolis Colts. This is one player on this list that I believe over all others, the consensus and majority of people are in agreement with. Michael Pittman as a rookie already produced pretty promising results on the field, overshadowed of course by rookies like T. Higgins, of course Justin Jefferson, but please don't let that be a reason you overlook Michael Pittman on draft day. While yes, on paper he was only able to compile 61 targets, 40 receptions, 503 receiving yards, and just 1 touchdown, we gotta take that with a bit of a grain of salt. He only appeared in just 13 games. The quarterback passing him the ball in Phillip Rivers was in no way near as accurate as both Joe Burrow as well as Kirk Cousins, 2 quarterbacks much more accurate, producing much more volume than that of Phillip Rivers on the Indianapolis Colts. And when it comes to Michael Pittman, the best part about him was what we could see from him on film. In 2020, he by far looked like the best wide receiver on the field. That's saying a lot because throughout different portions of the season, different Indianapolis Colts receivers did step up at different moments, but there's no denying that when it was Michael Pittman's turn to step up for this passing offense, he not only looked the best, but he shined while doing it. The best example of this was a 2-game stretch in weeks 10 and 11 playing against both Tennessee and Green Bay, in which he was able to notch 10 receptions for 167 receiving yards, and even caught his lone touchdown of the season, albeit one of the better looking receiving touchdowns we had seen all year. Through that 2-game stretch, he averaged 16.4 PPR fantasy points per game. The level of production I believe we could expect from Michael Pittman if he is able to break out this year. And with the new addition of Carson Wentz likely playing for his future and his career, there's no doubt that the production we're going to expect from the quarterback position with Carson Wentz should be much greater than that of Phillip Rivers. And with a new quarterback, one factor we know is that they always are going to be looking for a new favorite target. Michael Pittman led all Indianapolis receivers in snap share percentage. An impressive stat, especially considering it was held by a rookie, and it's one major factor that's going to assist him in potentially being the new favorite target for Carson Wentz. Being on the field the most out of any other Indianapolis receivers is going to greatly increase his chances and the odds of him receiving the highest target market share over any other receiver on that team. And with T.Y. Hilton looking like he's over the hill, other wide receivers on that team already having received opportunity in the past only to ultimately falter, Michael Pittman is now in a prime position to take this new role and really run with it. Pittman himself, he does have the combination of both size and speed, coming in at 6'4", 220 223 pounds. His 40 time was a bit underwhelming, coming in at just a 4.52, albeit still very impressive for his size, but he did come in with a 93rd percentile speed score, 57th percentile burst score, 66th percentile agility score, and one thing that should make him a major threat near the end zone is that he's not only 6'4", 223 pounds, but he boasts a 89th percentile catch radius. Us fantasy football junkies, we always love to do player comparisons, so whenever I'm watching a rookie or a young player on the field, I'm always trying to compare them to what we've seen have success in the past in the NFL, and the best comparison that I've been able to come up with for Michael Pittman after watching him has been a comparison to Kenny Golladay. Currently, Michael Pittman can be drafted as the 57th wide receiver off the board. That means similarly to Kmet, this is a player that all of you do have the potential to grab, and so long as Carson Wentz has any gas left in the tank, Michael Pittman has a strong chance to break out in 2021. Alright guys, we're moving over to the final player we have in today's video. That's the breakout at every position. And what's left, we have the quarterback. And I will admit that finding a quarterback that hasn't yet broken out in one season or another, it's been pretty difficult. And I did want to opt to select a player that has yet to break out. And I don't want to say ultimately we're extremely high on this player. With the depth at the quarterback position, this player is still likely going to be ranked in the mid to back half of all quarterbacks for fantasy football. But when I'm comparing what he did in his rookie season to where he could potentially go in 2021, there is no denying that a breakout is definitely possible. The player I'm talking about is of course Tua Tagovailoa. Most people have mixed feelings on how his rookie campaign went. Me personally, and from what I did see from him on the field and watching film, I definitely saw there was a lot to be excited about. His accuracy on short and intermediate passes, it was really all you could ask for. Of course, that was at the expense of his deep passing, which definitely struggled in his rookie year. A major factor in opportunity that we could see him taking a step forward in. And when it comes to quarterbacks over any other position, the growth that we see from them from year 1 to year 2 is much greater than the growth we see from them in any other seasons. Now, obviously, with him coming off of a major injury, our expectations for his rushing production had to be on the lower end, but this is certainly an area of his game we could see him taking a step forward in as well. In 2020, he had just 36 rush attempts for a mere 109 yards. Obviously, himself and the coaching staff had to veer more on the side of safety with him returning from his injury. Design rushing plays, not a part of the scheme. That's not to say whatsoever that he did not show off his mobility at certain parts of the season, which is a factor that could easily be seen by him escaping pressure, extending plays, and he even resulted in 3 rushing touchdowns for 2020, despite really only starting in just 9 games. That's a rushing touchdown average on every 3 starts. If that rate kept consistent for 2021, our expectations could be to 5+ rushing touchdowns, something that's instantly going to boost him and give him a 2-point fantasy floor. One other thing I believe a lot of people would be surprised to see was exactly how much passing volume Tua saw down the stretch. In fact, his final Week 17 game against Buffalo, he had 58 pass attempts, 35 completions, posting nearly 400 passing yards, ultimately finishing the game with 361. Now that of course wasn't his best showing of his all-around abilities. He did throw 3 interceptions to just 1 touchdown. But when we're looking for signs and factors and indicators of what we could potentially look for and expect for 2021, it was very promising to see him post those types of volume totals. And he also had another game in Week 14 against Kansas City in which he threw for 48 pass attempts. The week before that, Week 13 against Cincinnati, 39 pass attempts, and all of that is pretty impressive considering he did finish the season near a 65% completion rate. Now, I would like to see the Miami Dolphins bring in more wide receiver talent. So far, they haven't bid on any high free agents, but there still are players that are out there that they could possibly nab. And of course, we always have players with plenty of upside in the NFL draft. When looking and asking ourselves what path does Tua have in order to be a top 15, potentially top 12 quarterback, it would of course come on the back of a bit more rushing production, something I think we could potentially expect to see them work in for the 2021 season, so we can check that box off. And with a bit more help at the wide receiver position, his natural development from year 1 to year 2, I do believe that the efficiency in the receiving game and his touchdown rate will fall more in line with the overall volume that we saw, which was already very promising in his rookie year. So for that, we definitely have him as one of the top quarterbacks quarterback breakout candidates that has yet to break out. But guys, that's going to finish this list for us today. We really hoped you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.